Okie dokie. We're gonna go on and get started. Thank you, everybody who came here in person, and thank you for everybody who came and joined us on Zoom today. This is going to be a talk about strange genealogy mysteries and true crime. My name is Daniel Ware, and I'm the genealogy librarian here at the Kentucky Historical Society. And I do ask before we officially start, those of you on Zoom, if you do have questions, you can type them into the chat option, and then I can address them as I see them. And I'll try to get to them as quickly as I'm able to. But anyways, thank you all for coming and being here in person or virtually. Like I said, we're going to talk about strange genealogy mysteries and true crime. I'm going to try to kind of go over just some general what could be considered a strange genealogy mystery, and try to provide some ways that you might be able to get past that, different options that you can look at as far as solving that. And then I'm also going to be joined by my colleague, Dr. Charles Welsko, who is going to actually talk about a true crime example at the end of this presentation. So we can start now.
15?
Why?
Maybe, hold on.
So this morning, I was walking.
Okay, anyway, so yeah, it's the introduction. We're going to talk about strange genealogy mysteries and what they can entail, true crime genealogy, steps to solve these mysteries, and then, like I said previously, we're going to have a true crime example. And we're also talking about more than just what I have here on the introduction page, but this is just kind of the general game plan. Okay, so what kind of genealogy mysteries can you face? What would be considered a mystery? Some things could be, a disappearance of a family member. You might be following them up to a certain point, and then they just disappear. That does happen a lot. There could be a specific hole in your family's timeline or their family history, and you have everything but this one moment in time. It could easily be inconsistencies as well. You talk to family members and they might think they remember a particular story or a particular person, and then you find information about them and things don't quite match. And so it's always, those kind of things can cause some issues as well. There's also just loss of information, which could happen on different levels. It could be anywhere from you have a family member who may have either known this ancestor or known about this particular event in your family's timeline, and then unfortunately they pass away, and you may have not got a chance to talk with them and interview them, or they may have not written it down anywhere. It could also just be from as far as like a courthouse fire, and just documents being lost, that you may have known, okay, my ancestor would have been on this particular document, but unfortunately it's, lost to time or, nature or, things like that. And then also then true crime genealogy. Some of this, I guess, depending on, how you're looking at it, some of these things could kind of go probably together as far as the strange mystery and the true crime. So what kind of challenges can you face? Once again, there would be disappearance of individuals, especially if it does come to a crime that may have happened, and that one key person that you need to help figure out what happened with this crime. You can't find them anywhere. There may be an unknown location issue. So if you're not sure where this particular crime happened, that can also cause some trouble, because, obviously knowing where this took place can help you pinpoint, people that were involved, and, you can know where to go and look as far as, information, if it happened in, Barron County, Kentucky, then you might be able to travel to Barron County to locate documents to help you figure this out. And there could just be straight up just lack of evidence for the crime that happened. And, unfortunately, you may not be able to find enough information to help you figure out what had happened as far as this crime. And this kind of also falls into little to no documentation, because unfortunately, if you go back far enough, documentation can be a little more sparse. And people didn't necessarily write down everything, or stuff got lost or destroyed, or just unfortunately it just didn't get recorded. And there's also just the fact that if it was an actual crime, sometimes there's cold cases, things just didn't get solved. And there's, especially if it's too far back, there may not be a way to go back and really pick up that case. And so these can all be issues that you might have to deal with when it comes to these kinds of cases. Okay, and then just some general steps that you could take to help you solve these issues. One of the things is just to look at everything you've put together. I mean, that's kind of a general, you want to do that when you're doing your genealogy work anyways. Make sure, see where you're at, see what you found, see if there's anything in a particular area that you need to, fill that spot up a little more on. And you also want to learn about your ancestor, their family, and the community that they lived in. You want to find new paths that you may have not thought of before. And also, especially if it happened pre-1850s, you definitely want to get to know the older pre-1850 records. And then also just look at everything. If there's some specific idea that comes to mind, if it's possible, try it, because you never know where, this idea or this particular, idea may take you. Also, it's also a good idea to look at cemeteries, to make maps your friend, to look at books. Sometimes, you may need to translate foreign language documents and records. And also a key thing, like I mentioned, with the losing information or losing a family member, you definitely want to interview relatives and other individuals that may either know something about the mystery that you're trying to solve, or they may, be in an institution that can provide you with resources for helping you solve that mystery. And then I also want to talk briefly about like actual resources that would be useful for this. And then you can also sometimes consider DNA genealogy as well. Okay, so you want to learn about your ancestor, their family, and their community. What do you know about your ancestor? Who were their relatives? And what kind of community did they live in? These are all very important, because you can look in things such as censuses and see who their neighbors were. You might be able to find other pieces of information of like if they were in particular social clubs, or their church that they went to, and you can learn more about if it's the mystery of your particular ancestor, you can learn more about them by who they interacted with, and who they knew, and what they did in their everyday life. Okay, and then as far as finding new paths, that would kind of entail just taking a path less traveled, thinking outside the box, looking at different records and resources that you may not normally automatically go to, because I know a lot of people will automatically go to like vital records like birth records, death records. But sometimes, looking for maybe a baptismal record, or a tax list, or, some other type of documentation that you wouldn't automatically, day one go for, may open up a path, or bring something to your attention that might warrant you to check into that. And then that can help you maybe sidestep that issue and continue your path. Okay, and then as far as like pre-1850 records, it's a good idea to get to learn more about them, because especially if the event or the mystery happened before 1850, it's a good idea to look into that. And things like vital records weren't really much of a thing before the 1850s. So knowing that, you'll want to definitely look into things that were existing before the 1850s, because like unfortunately it wasn't until about 1852 before like the birth and death records were really starting to get recorded in Kentucky. So, things like that you may not be able to find things like that if it happened before 1850. So, things potentially like marriage records or, census records, things like that could still potentially be possible, because those, there were forms of those recorded before 1850. And also just in general, a lot of times we talk about like, try to go back further and then work your way forward. Sometimes that can work. So, looking at some of these older 1850 records could potentially allow you to see more information about your ancestor, potentially before the spot where you get stuck at. And then, you might find other information and then use that to go forward in time to where the mystery occurred. And if you have this new information or more information about your ancestor, that might help you to get past where you're stuck at. Okay, and just wanted to talk a little more in detail about the looking everywhere, never discounting an idea. If it seems possible, investigate it. And like I already said, it's a good idea to think outside the box. And this last point, I mean, that's pretty much a point that most people will probably, should be doing anyways. And that's, basically writing down every location, idea, and resource down that you come across, because it's just good to look back on in case, if that worked, then you'll know I can go back and kind of look in that same piece of information for other future research. Or if it didn't work, then you'll know, okay, not to go and retake that step again. And it just, it's a good idea just to, especially these outside of the box things and things you wouldn't have ever thought of, it just might help you with future reference. So just having everything written down, knowing everything you did, every idea that you even thought of, can just really give you a great source of an idea as far as getting past that. Okay, and then quoting Family Tree magazine, they were talking about as far as cemeteries go, in cemeteries, you'll find not just death information, but also clues to your ancestors' birth date, relationships, religious beliefs, economic status, and more. And so, yeah, these can give you new names, ideas, and new paths to get past your mystery. Kind of like I previously said, you might be able to find out, oh, they were a part of a particular organization or a group, or, what their religious beliefs were, what church they may have went to. So that can help you as far as, getting to know more of the people around them. And, it'll help solve, more mysteries of your ancestor. And also, if you see, oh, there's, more family members buried around your ancestor, you might not know of this particular person that was buried beside them or buried behind them. And that can allow you to have another name to look into that might help with your mystery and to help I guess bring your ancestor to life more. Let's see. Okay, and then maps, they can be your friend. They can help solve the mystery of your ancestor's location. They can also help with name changes, spelling issues, or different places that may have had the same name. Also, there might be a past, it'll help you get past like time period, like specific mysteries, such as if, a place that no longer exists anymore, your ancestor may have lived in this place. And if you can find an old enough map where that place still existed, you might be able to see, oh, it's this place now. Or even in the case of the like county boundary changes, that's always a big thing, because people don't always realize when they're looking into their ancestor, they may see that, oh, their ancestor, lived in Spencer County, but, you know, if they were born, you know, before 1824, then they were potentially actually born in like Shelby County, or, you know, one of the counties that eventually, you know, made part of Spencer County. So, and then, you know, of course, you know, people will see that kind of change and assume that their ancestor moved a lot, and that can cause some confusion and frustration. But once again, like I said, if you know, oh, this was actually, they may have still stayed in their same spot this whole time, but, you know, knowing this, looking at maps, seeing that they're, you know, they weren't moving the whole time, it was just boundary changes. Maps can also just allow you to see where your ancestor lived, just because, you know, a lot of people, you know, myself included, it's interesting just to see, you know, oh, my ancestor lived in this particular spot, you know, just to see for curiosity's sake, just to see, to better understand where they lived. And if they did move around a lot, you know, you could potentially use maps to follow their migration as well. And that might help you if you're hitting a brick wall as far as where they lived or where they moved to, or if they did disappear, you might see that they lived here and then they lived here and then they lived here. And then books, they can be very useful because, you know, you may, when you come across a mystery of your ancestor, reading up on a particular moment in time that your ancestor may have lived in, that can help you educate yourself more on maybe how they were living, their circumstances. Like I think I used for an example before, you know, if you know your ancestors, you know, migrated at a certain time period from like Ireland, and you're wondering why they decided to, and if it was you know, around the time as like the, you know, the potato famine, you know, you're reading like this history book and it tells you more about what went into that, the whole ordeal. You can kind of understand your ancestors' hardships more. And then you'll be like, okay, they moved because of, you know, this happened. And so it can kind of shed some light on that kind of thing as well. And it also may just provide new information. I mean, I keep saying it, but, you know, you may find, you know, a new person to look into, or a particular place that you didn't think to look into, or, you know, things like that. Okay, and then there will be times where you may need to, you know, figure out translating foreign language documents and records, because, you know, especially after you go back far enough, and you'll have ancestors who immigrated, and, you know, you want to, and, you know, a lot of them may have still spoke and written in their, you know, their home language, their home country's language, you know, for, you know, especially the first generation. And so, you know, being able to translate those can kind of give you a better insight into their lives, especially when they first immigrate. And, you know, you kind of know more what they're going through, and you can kind of understand more of, you know, what they were doing at that time. And also just older documents that may have came from your ancestors' home country. You know, a lot of people will go back far enough to where they're studying, or they're looking at the actual, you know, original country that their family came from. And, you know, you might, you know, want to go and, you know, visit that home country. Oh, no, don't do it. Oh, no. It's like wanting to. Okay. All right. I do apologize. We're having technical difficulties. The computer's wanting to restart. But yes, so you might want to, you know, visit, you know, the home country of your ancestors, and, you know, visit a church that they may have been baptized in, or, you know, and find their records, and being able to translate these records will help you understand them a lot more. And also remember to interview relatives or others. It'll give you a better idea surrounding the mystery. You might learn something new about your ancestor or event that's in question. And like I kind of previously mentioned, you know, talking even with like institution staff, library staff, museum staff, archival staff, you know, they might be able to help you learn about, you know, new resources that you didn't think to look into, or, they may have particular documents or papers that, that's the one thing you needed to help fill that one hole. So, talking, interviewing relatives, talking with staff of institutions can, help shed light on that you may have not been able to on your own. And then just, quickly, just some resources, some of the key resources generally that I would say you would want to look at that could help you fill in some holes. Vital records, birth, marriage, death records, those are always useful. Also, you may want to check out newspapers, because you can find obituaries, marriage announcements. I mean, I've even just found, where that even like looking at like obituaries or other pieces, articles in newspapers about an individual, it might state, that they were the mayor or they held this particular office in this, town. So it can give you information about, what they did in that particular community potentially. Census records are always great, especially if you're trying to follow where your ancestor went to. So, you can easily follow that and see who is living in their household, because that may be other individuals you may want to investigate. And sometimes it'll tell what their occupation was. And all that kind of key information. You also could look into, letters and correspondences that, your ancestor may have written, because that can kind of get into their mind of, what they were thinking. They might talk about, personal information of, between family and friends, they may talk about the big thing that was happening at the time. If there was a war going on, they might shed light on that war, how that was affecting them personally or their own community at the time. So, that can be very vital and useful as well. There's also court records. I have looked at quite a few of those, and, people would, go take each other to court over land. And, also, especially if you have ancestors who were, enslaved. I know there's a lot of, enslaved individuals. There's mysteries around them as well. You could look into court records to see if there were any records that were about their freedom or, anything like that. So, that can maybe potentially help solve that mystery. Also tax lists, kind of like the census records, it would usually kind of give you an idea of where your ancestor may have been living at a particular time, and kind of give you an idea of, what they had as far as, land or, their occupation and things like that. And then I did want to throw in just DNA genealogy, just because you might be able to actually find possible connections to even other. It's doing that, isn't it? Yeah, I was gonna say it's not. It's not letting. Like, because it did it on this laptop earlier. And yeah, okay. Well, anyways, but DNA genealogy, because you might be able to find possible connections to other, relatives who may have, the same DNA connection as you. And then you can also, that allow you to meet others who are potentially researching this family or this mystery. And you might learn something new from them. They may have found something that you didn't have. And you can also potentially, I haven't done a lot with the DNA genealogy myself, but, I know that people will see that they're, so much percent, this, particular, heritage or whatnot. And so, that may give you an idea of places to look into as far as your family history. If like that you may have come from a particular country of, at some point. And it just in general, it may help fill in some holes that, you may have not thought of before. Okay, and then now we're going to do our true crime example, and this is going to be presented by my colleague, Dr. Charles Welsko. He's the project director of the Civil War Governors of Kentucky digital documentary edition, and he's going to be talking about the Wadlington genealogy, so, or something like that.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you.
If this proves to be plot problematic, just like wave me and we'll burn it, or no good plan survives contact with the enemy or something along those lines. So no good presentation goes without some technical glitches on a Saturday morning. I'm hoping this doesn't shut down. It was giving me like a 10-minute clock, and I apologize for people on screen. Things are just always fun. Like Daniel said, my name is Chuck Welsko. I am the project director of the Civil War Governors of Kentucky digital documentary edition. It is a project that was started for the Civil War sesquicentennial, 150th anniversary back in 2011 to 2015. I'm going to give you a slight pitch on what the project is, just so you know of it as a resource. I think it might be something that could help fill in some mysteries, might be useful for genealogy, might not, but it's at least a cool project and you should check it out, right? This is purely a pitch, right, for you to use my website to justify my existence because my boss is here listening to the talk. But no, I think it's a useful resource, and I'm going to use a true crime example from it. True crime in this case comes more from the fact of we don't know who shot first. I originally had a picture of like Han and Greedo from Star Wars, but I didn't want a certain mouse-eared company to like demonetize our video when we put this up online, so I chose to not include that. CWGK has 10,000 documents that are written to the governors of Kentucky, and there are 5 of them during the Civil War because Kentucky likes to keep things nice and simple. They don't. Everything is crazy and chaotic, but there are 5 governors, 3 Unionists, and 2 Confederates. Despite the title of the project, we don't actually care about these 5 individuals because you're probably wondering, well, what do these 5 men have to do? I'm not related to them. How could they possibly help? We're more interested in the fact that people wrote to them. The governors sat at the intersection of everyday life during the Civil War era, especially in Kentucky, right? The destruction of slavery, the mobilization of armies, right? Somewhere around 100,000 men, 100,000 to 120,000 men fight for the Union and Confederacy from Kentucky. Slavery is destroyed. The state deals with multiple invasions and guerrilla warfare. These 5 men, despite the fact that we don't actually care about them individually, we care about their office and how they interacted with individuals seeking remedies about anything, right? Crimes, courthouses burned down, houses burned down, enslaved individuals have enlisted in the US Army, right? Any number of things that have happened. They deal with all of this. That's kind of the framing of what CWGK is. Again, it has documents that deal with everything from everyday life to military affairs. And I'm going to pull out one case that ties to 100 documents, possibly the most well-documented case we have in the project. And it's going to take us out to Western Kentucky to Caldwell County. It focuses on a killing. We know the kind of raw facts of what happens, but some of this true crime comes into what exactly happens. There's 2 very different interpretations of the event on the ground. But it takes us to Caldwell County in 1860, January of 1860. But to really understand the events, the clash that comes between Thomas Wadlington and his neighbor Milton Cartwright that ends in the death of Milton Cartwright, we need to go back a little bit further. And this gets us to do a little bit of genealogy in a moment. This is what happens when you forget the order of your slides, right? And I'm like, yes, the genealogy one is next, and it wasn't. It's not like I practiced this right before and was looking at them. This is what CWGK looks like when it comes to our documents. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, right, the original transcribed document, the original scan of the document, and then on the right-hand side, the transcription. All of those blue hyperlinks lead to what we call annotations, or biographies of every person, place, and organization that shows up in a document. This is the one for Thomas Wadlington. Every single one on the left-hand side, there is a social network. These show you all of the documents that these individuals were in, and it also shows you all the people they are related to. So all of the light blue dots, which I recognize might be a little far away and you might not be able to see them terribly clearly, the light blue dots are the documents, and every orange dot is a person that is connected in some way to Thomas Wadlington. Got roughly around 1,000 people that have signed documents about this one case, roughly. I'm a historian. I don't have to really be good at math. It's somewhere close to 1,000 people. And you can see, right, Wadlington's biography. These are not comprehensive. If your ancestor, you find them on CWGK, I apologize in advance. We do not have every single thing about their life. I always frame these as launching points, right? They're a place to start learning more about these individuals and contextualizing documents. So I've kind of explained what CWGK is. Let's talk a little bit about what happens with Thomas Wadlington and Milton Cartwright. There's the genealogy slide. Took me a couple to get there. So to understand this killing that takes place in January of 1860, we actually need to go back to 1849. There's a lot of names that are involved. I've tried to distill it down to 5 because in the past, when I've talked about this, I've mentioned all the names and people have gone cross-eyed. My goal is to not have you do that in like the next 5 minutes, right? There are 5 essential people, and I get to have one of them get bumped off pretty early because James Cartwright's going to die in 1849. He is the father of Milton Cartwright, and he is married to Mary Cartwright. And his death is kind of what sets our whole story in motion. Mary Cartwright is his second wife, and she doesn't particularly like the will that is left to her when she dies. The will is presented in the court testimony after Thomas Wadlington kills Milton Cartwright to kind of explain some of the foundational grievances between them. And this is the particular line that Mary takes umbrage with. James says, quote, "I likewise give unto her the northwest room upstairs and downstairs of my present dwelling house during her life, should she see proper to live in it, and use of passages therewith annexed." She gets a little bit of land that she can kind of rent. She gets a couple rooms in the household, and that's about it. Now, I'm no astounding legal expert. This isn't a great will. She doesn't like it. So Mary challenges this will. She works with the executor, this James Cartwright's son-in-law, to make a new agreement where she gets the entire household. She gets about 100 acres north of the road, and she eventually in 1851 is going to get some timbering rights on land south of the road that cuts through. And there's a map in a moment that I can show you all of this land to get some timbering rights. This also means all of the Cartwright children, by the time the 1850 census is enumerated, including Milton Cartwright, are kicked out of their family home. They're not living in the family home anymore. Their stepmother has taken over the home, laying some seeds for some family drama. And then Mary remarries. Couldn't have made that any better if I wanted to. She remarries in 1850 at the end of the year in December to Thomas Wadlington, who will move in and take over the Cartwright family home. For the next about 8 or 9 years, everything goes pretty well. The Cartwrights and the Cartwrights and Wadlingtons. What are words? Hello. Cartwrights and Wadlingtons live next to each other. Everything goes fine. The relations are amicable. Until Milton Cartwright, who was about 14 when his dad dies, comes of age, 1858, 1859, 1857, 1858. He buys out the rest of his siblings, gathers all of their property, and then 400 yards away from his family home, he builds a bachelor pad. He sets up a home, right? I imagine this grates on Milton Cartwright. Oh, is it doing? Oh, no. All right. Well, folks online, you can probably still see everything, but the computer here just shut down, so that's fun. Like I said, very few things go right when you're trying to do a program before noon on a Saturday. What I just popped up, did you get to see the map that popped up for those here? The map is a diagram that is made after the killing when Thomas Wadlington kills Milton Cartwright. What you probably glimpsed from that is their homes are about 400 yards away from one another. And again, Mary Wadlington will say in an affidavit after the killing, everything went fine. Things were going perfectly fine for a little bit of time. But then things kind of started to spiral out of control over timbering rights. The Wadlingtons had received some of the land, or at least the ability to timber on some of the land south of the old Hopkinsville Road. In late 1859, Milton Cartwright shows up on the door of the Wadlingtons and starts saying, basically, stop cutting the darn timber. I'm tired of it. You're cutting the timber for dumb things like fence posts or firewood when we could be using this to build buildings. And Thomas Wadlington kindly tells Milton Cartwright to go pound salt, right? From there, things spiral out of control. Seems like that's moving eventually. Things spiral out of control. Milton Cartwright starts complaining in town about the actions of Thomas Waddington. Mary will report that someone shoots at the household at one point. She suspects it's her stepson. And Milton Cartwright will approach the house again, being much more profane. And tensions are clearly ratcheting up towards the end of 1859, beginning of 1860. Sweet. I think we're back. So to kind of lay that out, right, the thing that space in green is roughly the property that belongs to the Waddingtons, or at least on this lower side of the map that I realize is cut off by some of the screen, is where they have the timbering rights. Milton Cartwright has all the land south of the road. Just to kind of give you the framing of how this looks. So this leads up to January of 1860. January 16th, everything's going fine. Thomas's son William goes out with one of their enslaved individuals to cut some timber. Milton Cartwright chases them off. So the next day, Thomas goes out with them. He carries a shotgun and a pistol, and they're going to go out to this space over here that's highlighted in red. We see that on the screen. And Thomas Waddington goes out to cut down a tree. He cuts it down with the two enslaved individuals and his son. And eventually, Milton Cartwright is going to approach him. And this is where things diverge. Milton Cartwright has a concealed pistol in his pocket. And after the gunfire dies out, Thomas Waddington's going to limp out of the woods with a bullet wound in his leg, and Milton Cartwright is going to be left behind dead, shot in the chest, shot in the head, and bludgeoned at least with an axe or a pistol at some point. Two stories diverge from this, right? Obviously, we don't know Cartwright's side of the story, but two white laborers that are with him says that in the middle of the argument over the timber, Thomas Waddington just picked up his shotgun, shot Milton Cartwright in the leg. Cartwright pulled out a concealed pistol after he'd been shot in the chest, shot Thomas Waddington in the leg, and the melee continued from there with Cartwright's death. Conversely, the Waddingtons are like, no, he had a concealed pistol. He pulled it out and shot at Thomas Waddington, and everything that happened after that was self-defense. I think I probably let a little bit of my biases go in there, but I can talk about that afterwards of who I think shot first. But that is kind of the mystery aspect of this. Who shot first? We don't know exactly. Again, both sides have kind of a different tale. What's fascinating though, right, and how we get to this large social network is the fact that there are 100 documents tied to this case. 38 petitions and 38 affidavits demand or ask for clemency for Thomas Waddington. He is convicted of murder. The Waddingtons will testify repeatedly that it wasn't murder, it was at worst manslaughter, at best it's self-defense. But there are also 13 petitions written by people in Caldwell County demanding Thomas Waddington's execution. So you get somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 90 petitions or affidavits that are written to the governors about this one case. And as you can see, these are a selection of those different petitions, kind of showing you long lists of individuals. And it gets more interesting too, right? There were accusations of fraud, pulling in children and minors to sign these documents, accusations of individuals signing documents for other individuals who didn't support one side or the other. I don't know exactly all the reasons why this spins out the way it does, but there is this really interesting ability, right, to see all of these people who sign these documents writing on behalf of Waddington, either for his pardon or for his execution. We found out about Waddington in part because of a mistake we had made. In that biography, we originally said that he dies in March of 1861 when he's scheduled to be executed. That was a mistake. Right? You know, one of those funny things when you learn you did something wrong. And a relative of Waddington had pointed out to us that he actually dies in March of 1863. And he dies a couple hundred yards from where we are now in the state penitentiary. His sentence is reduced to life in prison by Governor Brian Goffin. He's sent, I presume, to work in the hemp industry that is used in the penitentiary, and that's probably after 2 years. He's there from March of 61 to March of 63, probably what leads to Thomas Waddington's demise. But this is one of those stories, and again, I've flattened things out to give it to you in about 10 or 15 minutes. There are some, what I think are really interesting elements to this case so many kind of contradictory points, but it offers a good lens on how you could use a project like CWGK to unpack both this kind of family mystery that swirls behind the case, but also there's a bunch of launching points for you to use the documents and the individuals and the biographies that show up in it to capture more about either your ancestors or other individuals, maybe not yours specifically, but hopefully a reference to how you could use a site like CWGK to fill in some of these gaps. That's what I have. I have some information on how you can get to CWGK. It is on our website. If you go to the Explore tab, Catalogs and Research Tools, it is down at the bottom under more KHS catalogs, publications, and databases. And I accidentally hit that slide there. But Daniel, I can turn it back over to you. Thank you all for listening and surviving through the tech issues.
Okay, all right, so we've got one message in chat. Oh, we have two microphones working now. Hold on 1 second, let me fix that. Let's see, is that better? Is there still two microphones working? But they were, I guess, when I restarted when Matt restarted, because I have to like mute this big screen too. Okay, thank you. Okay, yes, so anyways, thank you to Chuck, who helped out with that true story or true crime example. And I also want to thank everybody who were here virtually and in person for attending. And I am providing my contact information in case anybody needs to contact me for anything or have questions in a future date. And yeah, so there's my office phone number and then my work email for anybody. I'll leave it on there for just a moment in case anybody needs to really look at it or write it down or anything. And I guess we can open up for questions for either myself or Chuck, if anybody has anything. Yes, sir.
What's the jury convicted?
I have a patron who's asking what convinced the jury. What was the rest of that question? To convict for the conviction.
Yeah, convinced. So I think it's just simply the fact that the death is so.
Here,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, just in case.
So so to make sure everybody can hear me, I think the answer to why he's convicted is right. There's no question that he does it. He's arrested pretty quickly afterwards, and I think it's the fact that it's so brutal, and also because his son is also involved, and they're two enslaved men. Because it's his family, his son is also arrested. The two white laborers accuse him of either participating, William the son. Walling doesn't have anybody that can testify on his behalf because the court doesn't allow William to testify on his father's behalf. So it's just his word. James Blaylock and John Prince, the two white laborers, are able to craft this pretty gruesome story of them shooting Cartwright multiple times and then taking an axe and a pistol and bludgeoning him. So I think it's kind of like how destructive the crime looks. And really, Wallington doesn't have much of a case other than like, I killed him in self-defense, but I have no one else to back up my story. I do, but you're not letting my son testify. And by legal standards, right, the two enslaved individuals cannot testify. We know one of the enslaved individuals is arrested, but eventually released. Haven't been able to figure out more about that individual. His name's Jordan, and I really want to know more about him, but I haven't been able to find any like evidence of what happens to his court case. So I think it comes down to the brutality. That was a long answer to that question. You're welcome. Get back down. Yes.
Genealogy today, do you know if there's any Wadlingtons or Cartwrights still in Kentucky or in that area?
I know
You want to repeat the question?
Yeah, yes. So you asked if, for genealogy today, if there are any Wadlingtons or Cartwrights still today. So two answers to that question. One, I know a relative of Wadlington who reached out to me. On all of our documents on CWGK, there's a button at the bottom that says suggest a comment. That's how they reached out to me. The email comes to me. If we've done something wrong about one of your ancestors, we apologize, right? Like we can't do everything. Like we can't. There are almost 20,000 annotations in the document, most in the edition, so most of those are people. Two, there is a family history back on our stacks of the Wadlingtons. What I find really interesting is that Thomas Wadlington shows up in like one line. That's like, he disowned his son in his will. That's basically it. And I'm like, I think there's a very interesting memory angle there. There's also, I just remembered this, there are Wadlingtons and Cartwrights that get married like August of 59. So like right before the tensions start. So I think there's layers to this family drama there. And we discovered this case like right before COVID. And then the whole plan was we'll go out and we'll do a bunch of research in Caldwell County. And then the world fell to pieces. And at some point, the goal was to go out to Caldwell County and do some more digging and see if there is more out there with this story. I think there is. I think there's a lot. I find the story very fascinating, and I'm trying not to talk too much about it because it consumed it got me through those early stages of COVID, right? Of like, no, I want to know what happened to these people. So I know there is at least one ancestor out there. And I know on Family Search, there's some interesting comments about like Wadlington's death and the conflict between him and Cartwright. Again, a long rambling answer, but that's just what I'm good for.
Okay. Chuck, can you talk a little bit more about the social network aspect of the site and kind of how that can potentially help genealogists? What does it tell us about sort of either family relationships or where people are living, or really the neighbors or family members?
Yeah, so the question is to talk more about the social networks, which I showed off on the CWGK annotations, and how they could show off, either be useful for genealogists or could be useful to show off social networks. And that's actually a note I had meant to talk about in my talk, so thank you. So yeah, the social networks, and actually, do you mind if I pop back? If this will cooperate, I'm going to go back to one of those. So we're talking about this, right? The social network this is a very complicated one. Most do not look like this. It is also bordering on like almost too much information and a little bit of sensory overload. What is really interesting about the Wadlington case is it actually gets to this question of what the social networks do. We've got one person who's writing on these social networks in the Wadlington case, showing how they are often connecting people locally within a couple of miles of one another, usually within like about 10 census pages of one another. So they can kind of show you like social and economic relations. A couple other documents we've come across that tie to events in Greene County, not tied to the Wadlington case at all, very clearly show a case about horse mutilation. And there's two different sides to this narrative. One side is very pro, like this guy should be punished, and they're fairly wealthy and affluent individuals. And the other side is a bunch of other people who are of a poorer class that are like, hey, this dude got screwed over by this family. You should let him go. He's a poor dude, like let it happen. So there is this ability to capture social relations and class. But for genealogists, I think there's also the ability to see either family members, right? There are often family members who will sign documents together kind of as a unit. And you may see people who have intermarried. So it allows you to glimpse Kentucky in a very different way, right? It allows you to see, taking one document, or in this case, right, a series of documents, and to see how different groups of individuals may be working together or against one another. My deeper suspicions about the Wadlington case is Thomas's dad is fairly well known. He's a fairly wealthy enslaver in Caldwell County. And I think most of these things play off along these larger like social political dynamics of the people who are rallying to Thomas's side. There's a guy from like across the states of like, I don't know what happened, but I do know his dad, and his dad's pretty cool. It's not all the language he actually uses, right? But like, it's like, the dad is awesome, so he should get a pardon, right? Like that's how politics in Kentucky works. Not really, that's not how it should work, right? But that's kind of how it plays out a little bit. Because I'm going to stop with my sarcastic jokes and turn it back over to Dave.
You can click on
Yes.
the networks.
Yeah, so Stuart again provides a good comment that I should have talked about, which is on the website, hovering over any of these dots will bring up a link you can click on man, that would have really been helpful to drive home early. You can actually navigate through this and click on the people that are related. It's not just a bunch of dots. We are in the process, hopefully, of going through a website upgrade in the next couple of months, which is going to make this a little bit easier to navigate through. But the goal is that you can click on either the documents or the individuals, and you can see these threads more clearly. Yeah, that would have been a great way to frame this early on. Thank you. Back to Daniel.
Right. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Zoom, anybody on Zoom? Do you have any questions?
If you want to mess around, stick the UK here today,
Mhm.
want to use some of these documents. Or that, so I feel maybe those are not like all the things, but people sort of see. how it works.
Okay, I think then, unless anybody has any other questions, I think we will, and these are my couple of references that I drew from, in case anybody's curious as well. So I guess if that will be it, I guess we will adjourn. I don't know if that's the right word, but anyways, thank you everybody who were here in person and virtually for attending. I appreciate everyone, and we should be meeting up again in, I believe, the second Saturday in April. I don't remember the exact date, but it should be on our website. So thank you all for attending. Have a great day. Let's see.
What's the topic?
Uh,